Okay, so just to notify everybody, our session is now being recorded. So we are going to start off. It's quite a long NSS session. I also don't want to just rush through this because I think for many students, this is quite an important one in the fact that it is the final one, and also some that might not have done that well in assignment 1 and 2 would really like to up their marks with this one. So if we can start off, as you can see, it's the same module, but it's got different codes depending on where we are. We, as the online campus, are the one with the W. It's 100 marks. They say it takes about 20 hours, and I think that is a fair estimate. I think it's going to take you around about that time. And it's for that reason why, although today is the NSS, we're about, 10 days ahead of schedule. I did do this very same discussion with us about a week or two ago as well, just for those that actually want to start on it, can see what's going on. Chris says, is most of the 20 hours for research? No, I don't think you're going to be doing that much research for this specific assignment. You obviously need to grasp the certain concepts of the philosophies and make sure you understand that, and then it's going to be more an application. But I will talk you through it and you'll be able to see where it is. So Marina, a little while ago, so NSS stands for National Support Session. So a little while ago, I did discuss the summative with you, but that was not an official NSS. That was just me trying to help us, where tonight's one is the actual formal one where we're going to go step by step through to make sure that everybody's on the same page. So let's start going through the basic guidelines. So unfortunately, I tried to change the slides to a PDF so that we don't have these funny breakups like we've got assignment, but the system didn't allow me and I didn't want to keep you waiting. So let's start looking at the general layout. This is for the whole assignment. This comes out of the PDF document, and it clearly states we must please make sure that you reference all the sources and that you make use of them correctly. So once again, philosophy is very much a academic field, and therefore your academic writing needs to be on par. You can't just write it like you would normally write an essay. You do need to do the referencing and all of that. They're very specific with our layout instructions. You've got to use 1.5 line space. You've got to use 12-point aerial. So some assessments tell you 11 or 12. They're being specific here. It has to be 12, and they only give you 2 options. It can either be aerial or Times New Roman. So please make sure that you stick to that. I did not compile these, but we have to abide by the instructions. So let's start off with question 1. And the way I'm going to address things, yes, says size 12, which is why I've just said we don't have a choice here. It is size 12. Does it say 11? Okay, then maybe they've changed it. Please make sure that you check it and make sure. The last time I checked it, I thought I saw 12. So we don't have to justify this. No, you definitely have to justify the assignment. You are going to be mentioning certain people's ideas, and therefore you will have to justify it by making use of references. So let's start off with question 1. I'm going to go through the basics of what the instructions are, and then I will go in detail where I give you a breakdown of what you should cover. I have shared, I'll be with you now, Chris. I have shared this document with you before. Okay, Chris, you can go.
Sorry to interrupt there. Just when they say justify, they're not talking to referencing. They mean when you actually click on the button to justify. It's the formatting.
Okay. No, for me, I never like justification as the layout. Thank you for that clarification. For format purposes, no. Justify is I prefer left margin alignment. It just marks easier. You're not going to get marked down if you justify, but if you're asking me for what do I prefer as the person that's marking it, always left margin aligned. If it is justified and it's square, it's been proven, they've done studies on it, it makes it more difficult to read.
Perfect. Thanks,
Sorry.
Jane.
Thanks,
Sorry
Chris,
for the
for
interruption.
clarifying that. No problem. So, Excelsior, does that clear up your story? Thanks for Chris for jumping in there explaining. I thought you meant, do you need to justify your arguments? But I hear what you say. Okay, so there's that then sorted out. Question 1. They put you into a scenario by saying to you, they're giving you a quote based on philosophy. So perhaps the most important influences of modern philosophical thought has been the disseminations by the Greek trio, Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. The ideas and activities have impacted both the content and the pedagogy of modern teaching and learning experiences and are fundamental ideas in academic classes. So they start off with, okay, if it says 11 point, then you use 11 point, Clinton. Imagine that you are at a gathering of academics and during a break, one of them make this comment. The purpose of education is to gain only all that is needed for a comfortable and affluent life, meaning the purpose of education is just for you to have a comfortable life with lots of money or sufficient money. The ideas of Plato are irrelevant, and the study of such philosophy is a wasted effort for education students. That is the opinion that someone at this meeting is making. Now, this is not just a normal gathering of friends, it's an academic gathering. So think of something such as a prize giving, maybe at a specific school or graduation, and people are sitting together and they're having this discussion, and this is what the person says. As a student of education philosophy, defend your study. So defend puts you don't have a choice here. You have to fight for classical philosophy, because it says there, defend your study of classical philosophy, especially discussing how Plato's allegory of the cave represents and promotes critical thought in education. Write an essay in which you critically do the following. Respond to the academic about what philosophy of education is. Explain why it is so relevant in teaching and learning. Discuss your beliefs about the purpose of education. Argue how Plato's allegory of the cave contributes to educating critical thinkers in the 21st century. Contextualize your responses according to the specific phase that you are training in, meaning you guys are all doing PGCE, so you are looking at senior phase, SP, or FET. You can use either one of those. You've got to put your arguments based on the phase that you've picked and write your answer as a well thought argument in which the above points are presented logically and coherently. Yes, Chris.
Sorry, when it says contextualize according to that specific phase, does that mean we need to use examples from the subject we're doing, or just address it as if we're addressing or using learners in that grade or of that age in the example? I'm just a bit unsure on what we mean by contextualize.
Yes, yeah, it is, Robin. You are correct. It is FET or senior phase. I would make use of the subjects you're studying. So you guys do SFTL with Visham and I don't know who all else. Make use of some of those strategies and arguments. When we do our lesson plan for task 3 just now, we'll discuss that a little bit more detail. But basically what they want to say here is when you are discussing how philosophy of education is relevant today, you've got to link it to I'm going to take the example business studies, grade 10. So that is in the FET phase. How is philosophy relevant to that subject at that age? Does that make it a little bit easier to understand?
Yeah, that's perfect. Thanks, Joe.
Okay. So please note you are required to reference the source you've consulted. Your answer should be approximately 3 pages. And as you can see on the left-hand side, I said there's usually 500 words per page. So, but for safety's sake, we always add the word count at the end of the essay. Okay, and now my slides have gone all wacky, but that's basically saying 800 to 1,000 words. Please indicate your word count and look at the rubric at what is expected. So here is then a breakdown, and this breakdown is in line with that Word document that I have shared with you guys that deals with how each section should be answered. So if you follow this layout, you will be covering every single aspect that they're asking you because they're individual bullets, and your answer will then be really good and you should score a really good mark. Robin's saying, how is the philosophy of education relevant to accounting specifically? Yes, so maybe you decide to go into realism. Okay, so now you've got to say to yourself, so when I look at realism versus idealism, which one works better for accounting? And then discuss how we are going to teach that based on that specific subject. I hear where the yikes come from. Accounting is totally Greek to me, so I don't understand it, but I do understand business studies very well. So I think you need to sit and look at yourself and say, okay, how am I going to make use of this in the classroom? Once we've gone through the whole assignment, because remember, in question 3, you are going to compile a lesson plan. And I think I would work this in reverse. I will first start off with task 3 in my lesson plan, and then I can work backwards and say, okay, how, when I created that lesson plan, did the philosophies link to what I'm teaching today? And I think that might be an easier way to do. So if we can go back to the discussion then of this specific question, you will see I would suggest you start with a 1.1 introduction, an introductory statement that immediately asserts the student's position of defending philosophy of education. So again, you do not have a choice here. You have to defend it because that's what the instruction says. Nathan says, sorry, I don't know if this is a silly question. Can one use Z library to find sources? I'm sure you would be able to. I don't know what Z library is, so I'm not familiar with it. So Robin says yes, so she's obviously knows what you're talking about, so that would be fine. Second bullet, there are 3 assertions in the statement, and I've colored them differently. So basically what the student is saying, he's making 3 statements. The number 1, purpose of education is to gain only what is needed for a comfortable and a life with money. Number 2, the ideas of Plato are irrelevant. Number 3, the study of philosophy is a wasted effort of education students. So those are the claims this person is making. And to be able to answer that, you will then have to say, what is the meaning of classical Greek philosophy? And what were the roles of Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle? Take note, this is still all part of your introduction. So don't go into major discussions. The meaning of classical philosophy should probably be a sentence of typed probably 3 to 4 lines. See, Robin is explaining to Nathan how to do it. Okay. And I would say, what were the roles of Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle? There are books and books written about these guys. In this specific section, in your introduction, you are supposed to cover a brief overview. These were the 3 great people of classical philosophy, and what were their roles related to education today. Then if we go on to 1.2, now we look at What is the relevance of philosophy to education? What is the importance of it? What are your beliefs about the purpose of education? Now, please take note so that we don't repeat some of the errors that we had in one of our previous assignments. Although I'm asking you for what your beliefs are, you can tell me, I feel education is this and this and this. Then you don't have to justify it. But when you say to me, I believe in A, B, and C, which links with critical theory, now you have to reference because you are saying what me, the student, is saying on paper relates to what another person or a philosopher said in the past, and therefore I need to reference that link that I make. Third bullet, how will you respond to the following quote? And then we've got it over there. And then the last bit, how do your arguments link with the phase you are studying to teach? So that phase is a really big deal. To get back to what Robin was saying earlier about accounting, we are actually going to look, because that's part of what the rubric is stating. How is your argument about the relevance of philosophy to education related to your phase? Number 1.3, you will then go into a discussion on the relevance of Plato's allegory to 21st century teaching. So, what is the allegory about? A brief little thing, I would say probably 3-4 typed lines, then a definition of what is critical thinking, and then a discussion on how does Plato's work relate to education today. And when I'm in the next slide, I'm going to give you a quick overview of what Plato's allegory of the cave is about. Then you're going to end off with a conclusion in which you give me a summary of the main ideas. You evaluate the discussions, meaning you're going to explain why what the student originally said in that speech at the academic function is not really accurate because of the points that you've raised. So very much like for those of you that did debating at school, this is very much you arguing for a specific point, and your conclusion is just touching on all those main points that you've raised. So if we go look then at our rubric, you will be able to see that for the introduction, I'm going to look for the meaning of classical philosophy and what were the roles of Socrates. So in your introduction, I've got to give you a mark for that. Then I'm going to go and look at the relevance of philosophy to educations and what are your beliefs about the purpose of education. So a student that's going to stock marks will argue for the importance of philosophy. They will discuss their beliefs on the purpose of education. They will give a strong rebuttal to the academic statement. So a rebuttal is just a fancy word for disprove, where you're going to say to me, no, this dude is wrong. That's not what it was supposed to be. And then lastly, how do you link it with the phase that you are in? So if you can look at it there, there's basically 4 things I'm going to be looking at here. This total is 8, so obviously we're looking at 2 marks for each of those things. So that takes care of that section. If we go look at what was Plato's allegory of the cave, that discussion, there's an excellent explanation of the allegory. You explain what is critical thinking, and you tell me what's the relevance of all of this for 21st century teaching. The last little section here deals with the structure and style. I didn't do any underlining here because I think by now you guys know what this is all about, but that takes care of question 1. So let's go look at a quick discussion on what is this allegory of the cave. If you attended my previous lessons in which I discussed this specific story, then just bear with me and listen again. If this is the first time you are listening to it, I highly recommend that you go and look on, yes, you will see the signpost of your essay just now. It was in one of the previous instructions. So I would recommend that you go onto YouTube. There's one to do with Plato's allegory of the cave in clay, as in CLAY, clay, like the stuff the kids play out of. That is by far the easiest explanation of it. You don't need in much more detail about that, but please do not reference a YouTube video. Rather make use of the YouTube to gain background information. Then go look for a reputable source that actually discusses the allegory of the cave and reference that. So, what is this allegory of the cave about? It speaks of the ignorance of humanity and that we are so trapped in our conventional ethics that society has formed for us. So as you can see, here is, let me grab my little hand. I don't know if it shows you. So here is a wall, and these guys are holding up shapes that's throwing shadows on the wall. On the other side of the wall sits these people that's sitting over here. They are the prisoners, and they look at these shapes and they try to make sense of it. I'm sure you've all played that game where you look at clouds or mountains and you see certain shapes. So that's now basically what these prisoners are busy doing. So let's look at a discussion on it. So Plato's allegory of the cave is a hypothetical theory. With other words, it's not a real thing. It didn't really happen. He was just making up this hypothesis. And the whole thing is about human perception, meaning how we as humans perceive the world around us. He makes a point that there are people who have an illusion of what reality is, as opposed to the actual truth, using philosophy and reasoning. We see a lot of symbols such as the cave, the shadows, the escape, and the return as examples of how we perceive truth and the journey to learning what is the actual truth. We can apply this philosophy into our own lives to help us realize that sometimes there are things that cloud the reality of certain situations. We just need some perspective. And that is what this whole thing is about. So basically, if I can give a brief summary of what happened. So we've got this one prisoner that happens to be freed. He then goes out into the real world and he realizes, but all these shapes, for argument's sake, the shadows that's on the wall on the slide, there is this jug for water. Now he sees an actual jug and he sees what it's about. He sees the shape of a pig, and now he goes out in the real world and he sees a real pig and he realizes, but oh my word, my idea of what a pig is so drastically different from what it is in real life. He then goes back to the cave to go tell his friends that, listen, guys, you have got the wrong end of the stick here. What you thought was a pig is not really a pig. And these prisoners think he's lost his mind. They think he is crazy, and they don't want to listen to him. And that is so much what Plato is trying to point out to us. That when we wake up, it's a nice way to put it, and we smell the roses and we see things for what they really are, and we go back and tell other people that, they often don't want to hear our story. They prefer to stick to the illusion of the reality that they've always had rather than the actual reality of what truth is. So that is basically what the parable or the allegory of the cave is about. So there's a picture of the Matrix when Neo, well, it's not actually Neo, it is Morpheus that says, I can only show you the door, you're the one that has to walk through it. And that is exactly what Plato's allegory is about as well. So if you are familiar with these films, I just know the first two, The Truman Show and The Matrix. But if you go look at Dark City, Cube, and The Conformist, apparently they're all based on the same principle where people believe one thing, and when we try and tell them, but your understanding of how it works is out, they often get into some serious trouble. So this is just basically what the allegory of the cave then is all about. In the previous years, in assignment 1, there was a big question that covered the allegory of the cave. Thankfully, they've now taken it out because it was like really sort of tedious that you've done it in one assignment and now again you've got to cover the same thing. And I feel the way that they've structured it in this question is really nice because you can relate it to education in whichever way you want to. If we just think of how COVID has forced us, where we in South Africa, and because I am really into inclusive education, if we look at it like that and we under the impression everything is honky-dory and schools are being inclusive, and then something like COVID happened and we suddenly realize the reality versus the perceived reality, where we thought all schools have got that, and now suddenly we needed to move to online teaching, and we realized that there is still such a big divide between schools that have and schools that don't. So there, I'm just giving you an example of how you could use the allegory of the cave as to what's going on. So I'm just coming back to what Robin stated earlier, being in accounting. How does it work? I know one of the major problems that people that do teach accounting faces is students generally, like school kids, struggle to complete the question papers in time. So that's been happening forever. So a question can be, well, what are we doing to change it? Are we teaching children to maybe just focus on certain things? I don't know the subject, so I can't go into that discussion. Nathan says, I got a question for 1.1, the introduction. Must we defeat each idea and then give the meaning for Greek philosophy and stating the roles, or while defining Greek philosophy and stating the roles, must we defeat the ideas? Let me quickly go through the 1.1. Sorry for those of you that's sensitive to flicking. Okay, so this is it. The introduction is basically you're going to start off telling me what is your position, and it should be defending philosophy as a concept. Then they give you the next bullet, just tells you these are the statements. You don't have to do anything about these statements because they're actually being addressed in 1.2. But what you should do over here is when you tell me what is the meaning of classical Greek philosophy, you can explain it to me knowing that you are going to argue this red, green, and blue stuff in the next section. When you tell me what were the roles of Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, again, you can tell it knowing that your next point is going to be to defend that. Because if we now look at 1.2, that is the third bullet, is now you are actually going to respond to what that person has said. Nathan, does this make sense? Okay, great. So now you know what the allegory of the cave is all about. We can now move on to question 2. So they start off with a quote. Paulo Freire was a Brazilian educationalist and philosopher whose radical ideas about pedagogy, learning, and knowledge led to the establishment of the critical pedagogy movement. Freire held extremely negative views of mainstream approaches to education, using the metaphor of the banking system to describe them. Freire argued that mainstream education, as it is predominantly practiced, revolves around teachers' attempts to deposit knowledge into students who are understood to be passive, empty accounts. Our story goes further and they say, although Freire located his philosophy in South America as an anti-colonial response, it also has relevance to South Africa. Discuss the influence of Paulo Freire's Reconstructionism and African philosophy on creating transformative practices and spaces in the classroom. When discussing these, specify how you would use the ideas and principles of these philosophies practically in your specific phase. Again, that link between the phase has to come in. I see Robin has written, aren't we all products of our childhood brainwashing? When faced with hard truths, we return to our comfort zones, definitely, to innate convictions rather than proofs. And that is the purpose behind the cave. This whole allegory of the cave is exactly, Robin summed it up so beautifully there. We go to our comfort zone. We go to where it's easy. We don't want to know the real world. We don't want to face the stuff that's out there. Yep, never finished an economics paper. So passed. And that's what the question sort of like is. So I would, from that point of view, question it. We know it's always been like that. I mean, I'm 50 years old now. In my days, the people didn't finish the accounting paper. In today's world, they still don't finish it. So clearly there's a problem. Why are we still fighting the same battles that we have for the last 30 odd years? And Nina says it as well. Sometimes ignorance is bliss. People don't want to know about the things that they're doing wrong. So, one of my favorite quotes, and I can never get it right, is basically once you have, it's to do with an elastic, once an elastic has been stretched, it can shrink back, but it will never forget the experiences that it's had. So, you and I, if we think of just our lives from COVID time, okay, online teaching is now such a common thing. 4 years ago, online teaching was not very, it was not the go-to form of learning, where now more and more places actually have it. Robin answers Robin, saying, I agree with you on your first statement. I even watched a YouTube video today where someone said she romanticizes her past, no matter what she went through, because that is where there is comfort. You already know what happened, so it is comfortable. So, yes, definitely we're facing all of that. So, let's go look at the breakdown. Again, you've got to use 800 to 1,000 words. So if we go look here at the story, we've got that again. We're going to look at the rubric and you've got to choose your phases. So you're going to start with an introduction. What is the background to critical pedagogy? Take note, there's quite a few of them. It's critical pedagogy, social reconstructionism, transformative spaces, and African philosophy. Now, you don't have to go into all of these in major detail in your introduction, but you've got to touch on how they are all related. And then you've got to say, how does this work in South Africa? Now you've got your intro done. Now you're going to go into 2.2, which is a discussion of critical theory. This is now where you're going to give me a full-on explanation. What is critical theory? And then you're going to tell me, how does critical theory relate to your teaching in the classroom? And we're going to repeat that pattern for all of the other ones. 2.3 is critical pedagogy. What is it? How does it relate to South African classroom? Banking education, what is it? How does it relate? Number 5, social reconstructionism, what is it? How does it relate? Take note, number 6 is a little bit different. Now we're going to go into African philosophy. Yes, you're going to explain to me what it is, but you've got to do a bit more. You're going to discuss the concepts of Ubuntu and community-centeredness as transformative practices. How does this philosophy link with that of Freire? So remember, they said that Freire's movement was as an anti-colonial movement in South America. And the question is, how does that link to African philosophy? When you look at them, you can actually see a link. Chris, as you are my unofficial secretary, I don't know if I've shared the example of the assignment. I got permission from one of last year's students, and I have shared it with my face-to-face students. If I have not shared it with you guys, please remind me so I can share it with you on WhatsApp later. Then you're going to end off with a conclusion, and you're going to just summarize some of the main ideas. Obviously, not all of these philosophies, just how all of these link to critical theory. So Clinton says, I have already shared it. Great. So here is our rubric, the introduction. I'm going to look at the background. Can you give a clear background of all of these things? And do you explain to me the relevance in South Africa? Then we've grouped together critical theory, critical pedagogy, banking, education, and social reconstructionism. Have you explained them and have you linked them to the classroom today? African philosophy, I'm going to look for the explanation of it. And then I'm going to look at the discussion of how does that link with Freire's theory. And then its structure and style. Next, we're going to move on to question 3. Please take note that question 3 consists of 2 sections, section A or part A and part B. I'm not going to go through this. I feel that the one that I've got makes it easier to understand. So there's your section B. Okay, yes, thank you so much. Nokutula is asking that Clinton shares it. So if you've got it, otherwise just remind me someone afterwards and I will gladly share it again. So let's have a look at what it is that you need to do. There's a part A, which is the introduction part, and there's a part B, which is the lesson plan part. So let's start looking at what part A is all about. What is the difference between a teacher-centered pedagogic style and a learner-centered pedagogic style? Okay, so there are some that fall in both it. So the first thing you've got to do is you've got to first tell me what's the difference between them. Now you have got to pick one of each. One teacher-centered one and one learner-centered one. I suggest you make it bold because it's easy to see your teacher-centered philosophy. So state which is your choice. So you can even go 3.1.1 if that's what you want to do. Discuss the main characteristics, include the metaphysical foundations, with other words, the ideas about the nature of reality, and include the epistemological foundations, how we know things. Then if you go on to the next one, state your learner-centered philosophy choice. And again, the main characteristics, what is the metaphysical foundations and the epistemological foundations. Take note, you can do these in a table format, but please note, we don't normally use bullets in tables because a bullet takes up about, in a table format, easily a quarter of the space. That is why I think it would really help you to look at the example, because the girl from the example did it really good and she did it in straightforward, very much in line with the template that I provide. Marina says, do we discuss strategies? Yes, not yet. You're going to do it in number B. For now, you are simply telling me what a teacher-centered philosophy is. So for argument's sake, if you decided realism is a teacher-centered philosophy, you will then discuss the main characteristics, the metaphysical and the epistemological foundations. And then if you decide idealism is an example of a learner-centered one, you will discuss it. And again, give me the metaphysical and epistemological. You're not doing, that's all that you're doing for 3.1, is this a comparison between these two. Now, in 3.2, out of those two that you've picked, that you discussed, you're going to choose one that you feel is the most suitable for your phase. So again, if I can go on Robin's one of accounting, if she feels the realism one is that links up with her subject, then she would make that choice. Okay, so in your rationale, you clearly have to state to me which one it is that you're picking. And now you're going to tell me, explain how your lesson will proceed, including how you would define your role, how you would teach content, how you will check that learning is taking place, and how will you engage your learners. Yes, Chris.
So, Joe, does this fall back to where we had that discussion about certain subjects lending themselves more to one than the other? So, I think, if
Yes,
I'm correct, the arts, I think it was arts, history, languages were more
yes,
idealism, and then accounting, maths were realism.
definitely. You
Okay,
can take it right back to that stuff. Definitely.
okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, so Leandre is saying, can you use a combination of the two? No, they are being very specific. You've got to discuss in 3.1, one teacher-centered, one learner-centered. You will see just now. Okay, so after you've discovered bullet 2, take note. This is where the combination comes in. Bullet 3 says, are there occasions for using the type of philosophical style that you did not choose? So if we're going to go with Robin's one, where I would imagine she's going to choose realism, now the question is, let's say she discussed idealism and realism. Now, bullet number 3 is saying, are there occasions in accounting where idealism can be used? I don't know the subject. Maybe she tells me when we have a group discussion on budgets and how budgets are formed, maybe. Or you have a quiz on what goes into what ledger, something like that. Now you can say, you could use that. So Excelsior says, guys, one of our ICE tasks were based on the different philosophical. Yes, you are correct. Your ICE task activity 2.2.1 was the 2. And now they want you to say is, after bullet number 3, you've got to discuss the reasons why you say it can sometimes be used, and you've got to give me examples, practical examples. So Roseanne says, will be idealism real as the strategy? No, it's not strategies. These are not strategies. These are philosophies of things that is more teacher-centered learning or learner-centered learning. Leandre says, are we allowed? Yes, you can definitely use your ICE task for that. Chris, go ahead.
So just to sum up and make it clear, what we're basically having to do is say, if we look at it from a teacher-centered point of view, do we choose idealism or realism? If we look at it from a learner-centered point of view, do we choose idealism or realism? And then for the second section, we relate whichever is the subject that we are doing for our didactics, and then say, for that specific module, which do we feel is better? Is it idealism or realism?
No, I don't think you got it right. Okay, so it doesn't matter whether you look at a teaching philosophy from a teacher or a learner's point of view. It's the way in which I am conducting teaching, and this is maybe where they keep on bringing in the strategies that Roseanne is talking about. Maybe that's where it comes in. So how am I going to be teaching it? So the way I would teach art would be quite different from how I would teach maths. Okay, it doesn't just have to be idealism and realism. If you go look at Learning Unit 4, there's actually a continuum of teacher-centered philosophies and so forth. If you ask me later on, I can share it. Let me just finish with this section that I can maybe stop the NSS. And then for those of you that's happy to stay on, I can quickly show you other slides that's going to talk you through it. It will make it a little bit easier. There we go. Tsitsy's got it right. So you choose realism, idealism, perennialism, essentialism, progressivism, existentialism, and social reconstructionism. Those are the philosophies we've covered. Some of them are teacher-centered, some of them are learner-centered. You've got to pick one of each. One teacher-centered philosophy, one learner-centered philosophy. And that is what you do in 3.1. You discuss those two. Then in 3.2, you're going to tell me, I prefer existentialism. and you're going to give me the reasons why what it is, and you're going to tell me how all of those things are going to relate to bullet number 2, meaning your role and so forth. Once you're done with that, now you're going to say to me, let's say I chose existentialism, but the other one I discussed might have been social reconstructionism. So now I can say I can make use of social reconstructionism in my classroom in certain cases. And then I've got to give a reason plus an explanation for that. I hope that makes more sense. I'm going to try to, we'll take, that's correct. Marina, you are correct. That's the way it is. But there's a lot more. You don't just have to use those two. You can also use those that are in learning unit 4. So when I'm finished, yes, you can use your iStask. So when I'm finished with the NSS, I'll stop the recording and I'll take a 2-minute break and I'll find other slides that I have used in the past to show you the link between all the philosophies. You could use your iStask. Yes, you could definitely do that and just add more to it. Okay, now we move on to part B. This is now the actual lesson plan. So the instruction is that you've got to create a lesson plan based on one of the philosophies chosen above. So either teacher-centered, learner-centered. It doesn't matter to me which one you have. I personally don't have a preference for one or the other either. I'm interested in how are you going to do it in the class. Edna, go ahead.
While you're still at 3.1 and 3.2, I know you've passed, but I wanted to understand with the mark allocation, it says 50. So which one is 20? Which one is 30 in terms of the lesson plan?
Okay, let's quickly go and look at all the lessons. Let's go look at the rubrics. Sorry, I'm going to have to come back to this. There we go. Here are the rubrics. So part A is 15 marks plus 10. So part A is a total of 25 marks. Part B is the lesson plan is 20 plus 5 is also 25 marks.
All right, thank you so much.
Okay, pleasure. Teacher-centered, yes, you are correct. That's the way I've got them as well. So let's quickly go through the lesson plan. And then I will help you guys with the different philosophies. There's a very useful one that's going to describe it for you in detail just now. Yes, realism is teacher-centered. So you've got to create a lesson plan. You've got to select a topic related to the subject that you're studying to teach. Okay, so you guys, you're gonna have either grade 8 or 9 or 10, 11, 12. It's a 30-minute lesson, and that is where the pawpaw hits the fan. You guys generally have to create an hour lesson. This is a 30-minute lesson, so it's short because I'm not focusing here on your actual lesson plan. I'm focusing on how you see the philosophy playing out within a lesson plan. So as you can see there, you've got to go through the progressive phases, meaning you've got to give me the introductory phase to the lesson, the teaching and learning phase, the closure phase, as well as the assessment phase. You've got to talk me through all of that, but I am clearly looking to see how do those phases link up with your philosophy that you've chosen. So if we're going to go according to Marina's one, where realism is a teacher-centered one and she's based everything on realism, in her lesson plan, she has to link it to that specific style. In other words, give reasons why you decided to do each step in the way that you have. Go look at the example that I've shared. It makes it easier to understand. Mishka says, in the introductory phase, do we need to specify take? No, that's not it. Yes, but remember, Visham is marking you guys for the actual creation of a lesson plan. You guys are doing a lesson plan for me, but I'm actually marking the use of philosophy within your lesson plan. So him and I have got very different focuses on what it is that we are doing. I would not use more than one because they're telling us you've got to use a philosophy, not two. You're going to just make it more difficult, and it's already such a short lesson. I'm going to explain to you guys now how to do all the different phases. Nina says, so if we use direct instruction, then that applies to realism and teacher-centeredness. Yes, correct. Okay, and then when you are finished with your lesson plan, in that reflection section, that is where you're going to figure out what's the strengths and the weaknesses of the different philosophies. So let's start looking at the actual lesson plan, which has now disappeared. Okay, so you guys are going to, I don't know why this thing is split up, because I have the slides just don't go. I'll share it with you properly on WhatsApp just now. The system makes it go all wonky. You guys have to fill this in according to certain things. Okay, your CAP specific focus, it's got to be there. Then you're giving me under C a brief summary. Like seriously brief, guys. This should not be very long. Just planning, I'm going to be teaching students the production function and so forth. It doesn't have to go into major detail. Robin, you can do that. Then you've got to choose your different philosophy the way you want to choose it. So you can choose whichever philosophy you want to. It's how you are going through it. No, I'm not too worried about blooms for your objectives at all. Okay. Then when it comes to a lesson, your lesson objectives, please take note, it's only a 30-minute lesson. You should not have more than 2 objectives. Okay, because remember, you've got an introduction, you've got a conclusion. You're sitting with about 15 to 20 minutes in which you have to cover 2 objectives. That's pretty hectic. A normal lesson plan should never have more than 3 or 4 objectives. But for the sake of this, because this is half a lesson time, please don't use more than 2 objectives, so you can delete the other ones. Then we go into the section called integration. If relevant, it is always relevant. There is always going to be integration. If you are teaching English, you're making use of life skills or life orientation. If you're teaching history, you're making use of English. If you're teaching maths, you're making use of language as well, and probably accounting. In accounting, you're making use of English as well as maths. So there's always an integration that takes place. Then we're going to go on to number F, the rationale for the lesson. The focus here is on the philosophical approach for this question. It's not on all these other goodies. It's what is your philosophical approach? What is the rationale that's related here? So now you've got your teaching and your learning strategies that you're going to discuss with me. You're going to tell me what are you doing in your intro, your teaching and learning phase, and your conclusion. And as I put there for you in red, again, they need to align with your philosophical approach that you have chosen. If we go into the phases of our lessons, let's look at introduction phase. This should be no more than 5 minutes because of the time that they've given you. And your introduction has to be a hook. So it must be something that's catchy, it must be out of the ordinary, not something such as, let's quickly recap what we covered last time. That's not an exciting lesson. So you guys are going to be working with teenagers. Music is an easy way to get to them. If you're in an under-resourced school, you can still play a song on your cell phone and the whole class will be able to hear it. You can link it with music. You could play a quiz game. It can either be on something such as Quizlet, if you're in a school where technology is all about, or it can be just normal hangman on the board. Yes, Leandre, it can be shorter, but not drastically, because your introduction phase is pretty important and you've got to tell me what strategy you're using over there. Then you're moving on to your teaching and learning phase. It should be around about 15 minutes out of your 30. So this is where you actually teach the kids whatever it is you're going to teach them. So again, you should probably make use of, well, at least one teaching strategy, but most likely two. Then we go on to our closure phase. Again, it should be about 5 minutes. It doesn't have to be exactly like that. And then your assessment phase, I've got 3 comments I want to make with this. This phase takes about 5 minutes. It does not have to be at the end of the lesson. We just put it at the end of a lesson plan to make it easier for you to add worksheets and so forth. Your assessment, the ideal place for the assessment phase is to take place during the teaching and learning phase. Then number 3, you do not have to design the actual assignment. So if you are going to give the kids a worksheet to do, you don't have to provide the worksheet for me, but you need to explain to me in the assessment phase. The kids are going to do a worksheet in which they've got to balance the books or what the heck ever it is you want to give them, so that I can see, because what is it that I'm going to look for in the assessment? Will that assessment help you, the teacher, to determine whether your outcomes that you've set for this lesson has been achieved or not? That's the function of the assessment phase of your lesson. And then unfortunately, this thing has gone all wacky. So this is where in the past, I would say we don't do it, but I've now spoken to the head of program for this module, and we've now said, no, we can do the strengths and weaknesses in the form of the reflection. So I'm sorry this page is broken up like that. You would be able to, I'm sure if you download it, you would get the better version of it. But basically, as you do this as your strengths and weaknesses, remember the focus is on the philosophical approaches this within a lesson. And then there you've got your different rubrics. I'm not going to talk you through the rubrics. But I think that really summarizes it for you. Yes, Edna, go ahead.
I wanted to ask, can we kindly create our own table for the lesson plan, but we still have the closure and the assessment and the teaching strategy on the table?
I'm not sure I understand what you're saying.
Because it says we must use the lesson template. So I'm saying, can we create our own table on the lesson plan, or we must strictly use this one?
No, you've got to use the official template. And the 2023 template is different from the 2022 template. They've changed it, the layout. So you've got to use the right one.
All right. Thank you so much.
Yes, Robin, that is part of your reflection. You have to take a guess. What could possibly go right and what could possibly go wrong? Typically, things that could go wrong is technology doesn't work. We've got load shedding. When you were planning to show them a video, that would be something that would have made it difficult. The students did not find the activity. Maybe your introduction activity is supposed to be fun and they didn't find it fun. That's the type of stuff that go wrong. Excelsior says, is there a previously filled in lesson plan for us to? Yes, it's in the example that I've shared with you all. So if you look at the example, although that's a foundation phase lesson, it will still be able to show you how to go about doing this. Leandra say, then you link it with the philosophy, the weaknesses. Yes, but Leandra, please do not make a big deal with this, the strengths and the weaknesses stuff. If you go look at the actual rubric, there's no space for that. So that gets marked holistically with the whole lesson plan. So please do not let that put you into a flat spin that you don't know what to do there. It is part of the total lesson. It is not a special mark that's going to be allocated just for that. Then Clinton, I think, has reshared it. That's why I said check the group. Beulah says, where can we find the template, or will it be possible to send us the template to use? I would have thought that Visham would have shared it with you guys by now because you've done lesson plans. But alternatively, if you give me some time, I will send Inez an email and try to get you guys that Word template. I've got it in PDF format. Obviously, you would want it in Word. I'm sure if you look on the Student Hub, you would be able to find it as well. Selena says, could someone be so kind as to download these slides and whatever else? Yes, I will share it on the WhatsApp group. Okay, Rourke says, fine, it's got to go. Okay. No, they're not compulsory. Yes, Nina.
Hi, Joe. Sorry. Just quickly, in terms of the different phases of the lesson, I haven't looked at the example yet. I'll do so right after this. But do we just then briefly say what will happen in this phase and then explain how that is relevant to the philosophical style? So, for example, say we will have a class discussion on climate change, and it is relevant to this philosophical style because da 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 da.
Yeah, but if you have you seen the examples? The
No, not
example
yet.
that was
I'll do
shared
that afterwards.
Yeah,
I have it.
if
I've
you look at
downloaded. I just looked at it.
Yeah, if you look at that, it's going to be easier for you to figure that out. And while I've still
Okay.
got Nina, do you still want to ask a question? Because I see your hand still raised.
No. Still just lingering.
Robin says, I also use I Love PDF to convert from PDF to Word. Yes, you could definitely do that. While I've got you guys, I've got the other slide open. I'm going to quickly share my screen with you. It is one of my favorite slides because it actually shows you the continuum between the different philosophies going from teacher-centered to learner-centered. Okay, so he's going from teacher-centered to learner-centered. Okay, so it's this one. So if I have to say slideshow from current slide to make it nice and big. So if you go look, on the left-hand side is our teacher-centered, and we move over to student-centered. So perennialism and existentialism would be examples of teacher-centered philosophies. Social reconstructionism and existentialism are examples of student-centered one. So I would stay away from progressivism because it's kind of like in the middle. So it's not definitely one or the other. And I think that is the important one. And I can hear you guys are posting like crazy. When I do a screen share, I can't see what you post.
Sorry, Joe, there was no option to download those slides. Oh, that slide. It didn't have that.
That I've just shared with you.
Yeah.
I'm going to open our WhatsApp chat now, and I will just share that whole bunch with you guys so that it's easier for you to understand what it is that we've got to do.
Thanks so much.
Okay, does everybody sort of like understand what's going on? I hear you are feeling a little bit panicky. I'm getting ready to end the session, but at any time, if you are busy working on your assignment and you want to just clarify something with me, you can share it with me, not the actual assignment. Send me a picture of something and I can say whether you are on the right track or not. Yes, Rose, you are correct. That's how it is. Nina, you can go.
I just want to add, in terms of these different philosophical approaches, I think it's PM3, the book that we couldn't find, and Robin got it. There's the different philosophical approaches. There are quite a few statements related to each, and there's a quiz, kind of a quiz you can do, and it kind of helped me to see which ones I'm more aligned with. And I think it definitely helped me to approach this question in terms of choosing which approach. So I feel like I would recommend the other students to just go through that perhaps and see, like, do the quiz, or and then just see which one works for them. It helps.
Is that pre-script material 3?
I think it's 3.
Okay. So, so Roseanne, I would assume you do it in the actual booklet from what the way Naina is describing it. It sounds like it's a PDF or a document of some sort.
Yeah, it's just like these statements, and they just say which one do you agree with, which do you not. And then, like, some of them I agree with all of them, some of them there's like 2 of them I agree with, and then each of those statements relate to a different philosophical approach.
Ah, okay. Okay, everyone. So I think let's call it a day then. Nina, if you've got that saved on your device, can you please share it with everybody? They seem to be asking for it. Leandra, yes, you can stick to realism and idealism, although the push is actually to make use of the ones that I've just shared. They actually want to make use of existentialism and so forth, but they did not eliminate realism and idealism. Okay, so Nathan says, I'm struggling to find strong sources. To me, a strong source is anything you look for on Google Scholar. When they give you suggestions, those are reputable sources because you know that those are actually you're going to be able to reference them correctly because there is the citing tool within Google Scholar. So I would definitely go with those. They are safer. Okay, and I'm going to go dig around to see if I've got another example of another student, and I'm first going to get their permission that was maybe a PGCE student so that we know that their stuff is a little bit more in line with what you've got. Then you've got 2 examples to work with. Okay, so I'm going to stop the recording.